What happens when a rising Republican star decides that truth and integrity matter more than party loyalty? That's the story of Jeff Duncan, former lieutenant governor of Georgia, who shocked many by walking away from the GOP after Donald Trump's lies about the 2020 election. Once seen as a future leader in the Republican Party, Duncan took the rare step of endorsing Kamala Harris, spoke at the Democratic National Convention, and has now made another bold move. He's running for governor of Georgia as a Democrat. The big question is, can a former Republican win over Democrats in a primary? And if he does, can he really defeat a Trump-backed Republican in the general election? Duncan's journey has been shaped by a breaking point that many Americans remember all too well, the attempt by Donald Trump to overturn the 2020 election. For Duncan, the chaos and the threats that followed were deeply personal. When Trump went after Georgia officials online, his own family received death threats. To him, this wasn't just politics anymore. It was an assault on democracy itself. Rather than back down, he chose to stand firm and resist Trump's pressure to help overturn Georgia's results. That decision cost him his standing in the Republican Party, but it also opened the door to a new political identity. When asked why he would enter a Democratic primary instead of running as an independent, Duncan explained that independents simply can't make enough impact. To him, choosing the Democratic Party wasn't about political convenience, but about values. He says the Democratic toolkit is better equipped to help communities grow, to protect neighbors, and to make sure government is focused on serving people rather than serving one man's ego. For Duncan, switching parties wasn't about strategy. It was about staying true to what he teaches his three sons. Doing the right thing will never be the wrong thing. Georgia hasn't elected a Democratic governor in 27 years. That's nearly 3 decades of Republican control. Duncan believes that record is exactly why Democrats are ready to try something new. He argues that many Georgians are tired of toxic politics, constant division, and leaders who thrive on chaos rather than solutions. Instead of focusing on party battles, Duncan is centering his campaign on the issues that touch people's daily lives: affordability, healthcare, public safety, and education. He insists that Georgia's best days are still ahead, but only if leaders stop chasing culture wars and start solving problems. One of Duncan's main points is electability. He doesn't spend much time attacking his Democratic opponents in the primary because he sees the bigger fight coming in the general election. Trump has already chosen his candidate, Republican Bert Jones, who Duncan warns would essentially hand the state over to Trump from day one. Duncan argues that if Democrats want to actually win the governorship, they need someone who can pull in not just Democrats, but independents and even disillusioned Republicans. He believes he's the only candidate who can build that coalition and actually flip Georgia back to Democratic leadership. The Trump factor still looms over every race in Georgia. Trump has tried to portray himself as a strongman who can take over local matters, even threatening to send troops into American cities. When asked what he would do if Trump demanded to send federal forces into Atlanta, Duncan rejected the idea outright, calling it unnecessary and dangerous. He pointed out that Atlanta already has strong law enforcement and effective leadership under Mayor Andre Dickens. In his view, Trump's calls for dominance and control are less about safety and more about fear and political theater. For Duncan, real leadership is about cooperation, but not intimidation. Georgia's role as a political battleground makes this race even more significant. In 2020, the state became the center of the political universe when Joe Biden narrowly carried it and Democrats Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock won U.S. Senate seats. Duncan believes his campaign could be the next proof that Democrats can win in tough states if they focus on issues and reject Trump-style politics. What happens in Georgia could set the tone for other swing states in upcoming elections. Beyond national politics, Duncan also highlights the local realities Georgians face. He points to the affordability crisis that makes it harder for families to keep up with rising costs. He calls out the healthcare system where too many are left behind. And he doesn't ignore the role of federal jobs in Georgia, especially with the CDC headquartered in Atlanta. He says Trump's reckless decisions have threatened middle-class livelihoods, hollowing out stable jobs without offering real solutions. To Duncan, these issues aren't abstract debates. They're about protecting families and giving people a fair chance at success. The campaign is also about tone and trust. Duncan is clear that he wants to lower the political temperature. He's not interested in yelling matches or name-calling. Instead, he frames his campaign around calm, steady leadership that looks for solutions. That may seem old-fashioned in today's climate, but Duncan believes it's exactly what many Georgians are craving after years of turmoil. Of course, critics question whether Democrats will truly embrace a candidate with a Republican past. Some worry that his history in the GOP could make him untrustworthy to progressive voters. But Duncan argues that his record speaks louder than labels. He broke with Trump when it mattered most, took the risk of endorsing a Democrat for president, and has paid the price in his own party for estate. ending up for democracy. To him, those choices prove his commitment isn't about personal gain, but about doing what's right. The broader fight, Duncan warns, is about the survival of democracy itself. He notes how many Trump actions have ended up in court, showing just how far outside the norms this era has stretched. Every time Trump pushes the envelope, institutions like the courts and state governments are forced to hold the line. That's why Duncan says governors matter so much. They can be guardrails when national politics veer into dangerous territory. With leaders like Gavin Newsom in California and others, he sees Democratic governors as essential to protecting democratic norms. Looking back, the last Democrat to win Georgia's governorship was Roy Barnes in 1998. Duncan believes it's time to make history again. He draws inspiration from Ossoff, Warnock, and Biden's Georgia victories, which proved that the state can swing blue when the right coalition comes together. His hope is to lead the next chapter of that story, not through division, but through a campaign that brings together Democrats, independents, and frustrated Republicans around a common goal: putting people before party. At the heart of Duncan's campaign is a simple principle he repeats often: doing the right thing. That was the motto of his speech at the Democratic National Convention, and it's what he says guides his personal and political life. It's the lesson he wants to pass down to his children and the message he wants Georgians to believe when they look at him, not as a party defector or a political strategist, but as a leader who refused to bow to pressure and chose integrity over ambition. Whether Duncan can actually win the Democratic nomination remains to be seen. Whether he can overcome doubts about his Republican past is another question, but what's clear is that his candidacy is not just about one race. It's about testing whether American voters are ready to reward politicians who put principle first, even when it comes at a personal cost. If Georgia voters decide to give Duncan a chance, it won't just change the leadership of one state. It could send a powerful message across the country. A message that says integrity still matters, that democracy is worth defending, and that sometimes the bravest move a politician can make is to switch sides when their party loses its way.